Welcome to another Fantasy Goodfellas video where we talk about the top 30 running back rankings for Week 10. You ready?
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
Rolling on the field.
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
All right, before we get started, I want to remind you that these are not our rankings. These are compiled from experts and sports writers. We're reacting to them. And what I hope from this video is you'll get to see some stats and trends that will help you with your lineups. And at the end of the video, we'll take a look at all the top 30 running backs who ranked with stats from this past week. All right, let's get started. At number 1, who else? Christian McCaffrey at the Jacksonville Jaguars. There's no question that Christian McCaffrey, if you have him, he's got to be your number 1 running back. But just look at this trend right here. That's a weird trend from a running back. So that's his rushing rankings, and that's his stats. So it's not going to change your lineups, but what he's trending. At number 2, Travis Etienne versus the San Francisco 49ers. And the problem I see with Travis Etienne is that offense should be a lot more potent than it is. And he's only had one game with over 100 rushing yards. And if you look at his TDs, he's gone into the end zone multiple times, but there's some weeks he doesn't even get into the end zone. At number 3, Austin Eckler versus the Detroit Lions. No matter how elite you are as a running back, you're not always expected to win or be elite every week. But Austin Eckler was the 4th ranked running back in Week 9. He had 47 rushing yards, 23 receiving yards. That was good for 4th. But, man, that's not a lot of production. Number 4, Jonathan Taylor at the New England Patriots. And I think with Jonathan Taylor, 47 rushing yards, 22 receiving yards, that's okay, but that's not cutting it from probably a high draft pick or a gamble when it came to drafting. At number 5, Tony Pollard versus the New York Giants. Tony Pollard is a good running back. It's just sometimes the ball just doesn't go that running back route. He had a drop, or he had a touchdown called back. He had another long play called back. I think that's what's hurt him when it's come to that. At number 6, you got Derrick Henry at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And with Derrick Henry, now that Will Levis is your starter at quarterback, how will that affect your running back? Well, Derrick Henry had 75 rushing yards and a TD and 27 receiving yards. If he can keep those receiving yards up, he's going to really help your fantasy owners out. At number 7, Josh Jacobs versus the New York Jets. I think Josh Jacobs definitely has a better chance going against that New York Jets front line than it does the secondary. But in Week 9, he had 2 TDs and 98 rushing yards. At number 8, you have Breece Hall at the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think with Breece Hall, you expected a little bit more from him. But he did have 60 total yards. That offense as a whole, Zach Wilson had 263 passing yards, but no touchdowns. And if you're not getting that production from the wide receivers, they can just stack the line. Number 9, you got Joe Mixon versus the Houston Texans. Now, this might be a shootout. And if it's a shootout, then you're not really dependent on your running backs. Maybe short yardage attempts. And if you look at his yards per carry, 2.6 yards per carry, that's not open field, flat out sprinting speed there. Number 10, you got Saquon Barkley at the Dallas Cowboys. Saquon Barkley had 90 rushing yards, 23 receiving yards. If you look at Barkley overall this season with this rankings, he could be an elite first stringer on your fantasy team. Some weeks he might not be, but it's Saquon Barkley. You're playing him regardless of what's going on with him. At number 11, Alvin Kamara at the Minnesota Vikings. Now, if you picked up Alvin Kamara probably late in your drafts, or if you did pick him up early, it's finally paying off, and he's getting some production. It just all depends on those touchdowns. At number 12, you got Rachaad White versus the Tennessee Titans. Now, Rachaad White was the number 1 running back in Week 9. He did that with 73 rushing yards, 2 TDs, 46 receiving yards. That put him at the top of the list. At number 13, Kenneth Walker versus the Washington Commanders. Kenneth Walker, I've been saying this when it comes to the offense. It's just that offense is just it fell off. The wheels fell off. I don't know what's going on with them. Can't depend on any Seattle Seahawks player. At 14, Ramondre Stevenson versus the Indianapolis Colts. Now, this will be an interesting matchup. I think both these teams are pretty desperate at this point. And if you're looking for Stevenson to get into the end zone, he got into the end zone last week, but he's only got into the end zone 3 times this season. That's not cutting it. At number 15, Aaron Jones at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aaron Jones had 73 rushing yards and a TD. He was in your top 10. That bode pretty well for him. At 16, James Cook versus the Denver Broncos. You think the Dolphins can light him up. Why can't Buffalo Bills light up this Denver defense? I don't know when Denver's defense comes on, but they do come on. And will it be this week? Not sure. At 17, Alexander Madison versus the New Orleans Saints. And I think now that Joshua Dobbs is now your starter, I think you're going to have to depend on Madison more and take the load off of Dobbs. At number 18, you got David Montgomery at the Los Angeles Chargers. I think Montgomery is finally coming back from being out of the lineup. What will he do? It's anybody's guess, but I don't think he'll have a 3 TD game. At number 19, Javonte Williams at the Buffalo Bills. Now, here's a guy that can do very well. He's the top. He's ranked 8. If you look at season over season here, he could do well. We expected more from him, but from 6 to 8, he was putting up some numbers for you. Number 20, James Conner versus the Atlanta Falcons. Well, now that Murray's coming back, will this affect Conner? I hope, and for the whole team's sake, you hope. Number 21, Bijan Robinson at the Arizona Cardinals. I think this is the game that Bijan Robinson can really turn it on, and you hope that you can kind of depend on him moving forward as it gets late in the season because he was a high draft pick. At number 22, Najee Harris versus the Green Bay Packers. Now, Najee had 69 rushing yards and a TD, and that helped. But seems to be picking it back up, and it's definitely not a passing offense, so he might be the beneficiary of that poor offense. At 23, Brian Robinson versus at the Seattle Seahawks. Brian Robinson had 63 rushing yards and a TD. He was the 16th ranked running back. And if we look at what he's done, he's had a little mid-season dip right here, 5, 6, and 7. Then kind of picked it back up. And then he's been steadily getting into the end zone, and that really helps. So if you're Brian Robinson owners, I'd trust him moving forward. At 24, Gus Edwards versus the Cleveland Browns. Well, Gus Edwards, he had 2 TDs last week, and if we look at his TDs on the season, he's had multiple TDs the last 2 weeks. He's been into the end zone the last 3 weeks. What do you expect? I expect him to be into the end zone this week. I'd be surprised if he didn't. At 25, Chuba Hubbard at the Chicago Bears. Now, Chuba Hubbard, 58 rushing yards. He was the 26th ranked running back. And that, if we look at his stats, nothing to write home about. And 1 touchdown on the season doesn't really look good. At number 26, Jerome Ford at the Baltimore Ravens. We expected more from Jerome Ford. He had 77 total yards. But if we look at his chart now that their main running back went down, you look at this and he's slowly trending back down again and not really getting into the end zone. A little letdown. At 27, Jahmyr Gibbs at the Los Angeles Chargers. This is a team that doesn't really have to do too much, right? Everybody kind of does their thing. They got a lot of skilled positions that can succeed, so you don't know where that ball goes to, and that kind of hurts if you're a Gibbs owner. At number 28, Tyler Aguilar at the Arizona Cardinals. Now that you have a different quarterback starting, you got Heineke starting, will that bode well for Tyler? Not sure, but seeing two Falcons running back in the top 30 is a little bit of a shocker. At 29, Khalil Herbert versus the Carolina Panthers. And I think this is where, if you look at him, is whether he was injured, he just didn't play. He only had one game over 100 yards. If you look at TDs, he only had one TD on the season. And now you got him ranked 29. That's a little stretch in my opinion. And at number 30, Jaylen Warren versus the Green Bay Packers. Now here you got two running backs in the top 30. What did Warren do last week? He did 88 rushing yards, 25 receiving yards. That put him for 15. So maybe it's not a shocker that they can kind of get into the end zone or have two running backs in the top 30, but they just don't throw it. And that is going to do it for your top 30 wide receivers. Your running backs for week 10. What I want to do before we leave here is I want to show you the running backs from week 9, the stats. So if we look, you have Keaton Mitchell was your third top running back. Nobody's radar, nobody's projections. Then you have Jaylen Warren was 15. Kareem Hunt was 17. And Jerick McKinnon got in there. Then you got Gainwell made an appearance over DeAndre Swift. Chuba Hubbard. And then you have Miles Sanders. So you have two running backs from the Carolina Panthers in your top 30 in week 9. So if you're looking for some players to start, those are the ones I would look at because they did good last week. Maybe they got some momentum moving forward. And that is your top 30 running back rankings for week 10. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, good luck, fantasy owners. It's getting down to the wire. Not everybody is paying attention to their teams. So it's the ones that are still making moves that are going to succeed moving forward. All right. Good luck.
The Fantasy Goodfellas.
Rolling on the field.
The Fantasy Goodfellas.